Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. The Syrian rebels are already in Aleppo. In a city of 1 million people, they just walked in, meeting no resistance, calmly, now moving through the streets. Probably the troops were not besieged at all or did not immediately flee the city. Here, by the way, is the first footage of the Syrian rebels walking in. And before that, Syrian rebels seized a huge warehouse with Russian weapons, ammunition, and military equipment. And before that, Syrian rebels seized a huge warehouse with Russian weapons, ammunition, and military equipment. In this footage, the insurgents can be seen calmly moving and operating under clear and open skies as air work is minimal. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Now the Mujahideen brothers are advancing towards the city of Aleppo. In Aleppo, we are making our way to Aleppo, God willing, God willing. Oh people, pray, pray, just pray. Meanwhile, government troops and Assad loyalist officials are just fleeing. The rebels were advancing so fast that the ASSAD analysts simply didn't have time to draw maps. As part of the operation to deter aggression, we are now liberating the areas of Mezanat, Didraya, Kafr Kalab, Sheikh Ali, and neighboring areas where Iranian Assad militias were deployed and bombed civilians. And now, thank God, after the expulsion from these territories, God willing, the civilians will return to their homeland, safe and sound. We were forced to flee from our town because of the repeated bombardment by aircraft, rockets, and all kinds of weapons that Bashar Assad and his army used to bombard my village, which caused destruction that forced us to flee to the camps. We suffered a lot in the camps. But when I returned yesterday and today to the village, found it liberated. It was an indescribable joy for me, all the villagers of Kafr Halab. And recall how many years Putin and Assad fought over Aleppo, how much money the Kremlin spent on this war. In the end, the country's largest city practically fell in a matter of days. And meanwhile, the Syrian president flew to Moscow to ask for Putin's help. But the so-called head of the Kremlin now has no way to help his ally. This to the 24th channel, noted military expert, colonel of the AFU, Sergei Grabsky. As early as in the middle of 2024, 90% of the Russian Federation's land forces have already been used in one way or another on the battlefields of Ukraine and Kursk region. In the garrisons that remain in the places of dislocation, particularly on the Kola Peninsula, in Russian subdivisions, 10 to 12% of the special forces remain. Of course, there may be units involved that do not take part in combat operations on the territory of Ukraine, but they are very few in number and perform tasks to cover other parts of the border. In particular, the NATO countries in the Baltic region, Finland, and Finlandia, as well as in the Transcaucasus, where Russian troops are stationed, have to cover the cordons. In Virginia in particular, to hold bases in the temporarily occupied territory of Georgia. And in Central Asia, particularly in Tajikistan. So, despite the large number of troops, one should realize that Putin in particular has nothing to share with his revered teacher, Bashar Assad. Sergei Grabsky noted that it is unlikely that Putin has the human and technical resources to provide Bashar al-Assad with them. In the middle of 2024, 90% of the Russian Federation's land forces will have already been engaged in some way on the battlefields of Ukraine and the Kursk region. Of course, units that are not involved in hostilities on the territory of Ukraine can be involved, but there are very few of them, and they perform tasks to cover other parts of the border. As for the situation around Aleppo, Of course, this is an attack on Syria's sovereignty in the region, and we are in favor of the Syrian authorities bringing order to the area as soon as possible. Even if Putin had the resources to help, there is a big question as to how they could be moved into Syria. It is unlikely that Russia would allow military equipment and weapons to be moved across the Bosporus and Dardanelles. It would also be a big problem to organize an air bridge planes. There are doubts as to how to get them there, whether Turkey would allow military planes to fly over its territory. Fighting in Syria has been effectively frozen since 2020. But after a 4-year relative lull, opposition forces suddenly launched a massive strike on Aleppo province, for which the Assad regime was probably unprepared. Friends, that's it for now. Be sure to post a comment, and until next issue. Dear brothers and sisters, here we are, the first groups of Injamas have come in to cleanse the city, to cleanse the city, to cleanse the city, and as befits true believers, we bow before Allah, thanking Him for these His favors. Allahu Akbar. Every time Allah gives victory, gives an opening to the Muslims,
Ассаламу алейкум рахматуллахи баракату. Дорогие братья и сестры, мы вот-вот уже зашли. Первые группы ингемасов зашли, чтобы очистить город, провести очистку. И как подобает настоящим верующим, мы переклоняемся перед Аллахом Субханаху ва Тааля, благодаря Его за эти Его милости. Аллаху Акбар. Каждый раз, когда Аллах Субханаху ва Тааля дает победу, дает открытие мусульманам, а этот город около 9 лет.
And this city has been under occupation of the Iranians for about 8 years, to be more precise. And today, for the first time, the Mujahideen have come in and are now carrying out a complete cleanup, so that tomorrow, after tomorrow, its residents, the real Muslims who owned these houses before they were expelled, can come here. Everyone who comes here, no matter if he is a mujahideen or a journalist, a media person. All of them bow down to Allah as thanksgiving.